Roger Trinquier was a French army officer during World War II, the First Indochina War and the Algerian War, serving mainly in airborne and special forces units. He was also a counter-insurgency theorist, mainly with his book Modern Warfare. Early life. Roger Trinquier was born on the 20th of March 1908 in Le Baume, a small village in the Hautes-Alpes department, to a peasant family. He studied at a one-room village school in his home village until 1920, when he entered the École Normale of Aix-en-Provence. He graduated in 1928 at 20 and was called up for 2 years compulsory military service, being sent to the French Army's Reserve Officers' School, where, unlike most of his classmates, he became interested in the military. When Trinquier's 2 years of compulsory military service came to an end, he decided to remain in the army and was transferred to the Active Officers' School of Saint-Maixent, from which he graduated in 1933 as a second lieutenant. He now joined the colonial infantry, after some time with the 4th Senegalese Tirailleur Regiment at Toulon. He embarked on a ship bound for Indochina on the 11th of May 1934. He was first stationed at Kaila, near Langsun, in Tonkin. He then took command of a French outpost at Kaimar on the Chinese border. Trinquier returned to France in 1936 and was assigned to the 41st Colonial Infantry Machine Gun Regiment at Sarolbe, where he commanded a company until he was sent to China in early August 1938. He served in the French concessions in China, first in Tianjin, then Beijing and finally Shanghai in January 1940. While stationed there he also learned Chinese. Promoted to captain, he commanded a company of the French military detachment there until the 3rd of January 1946, under circumstances that had until 1945 become increasingly difficult during the Japanese invasion and occupation of large parts of China, Indochina. He arrived at Saigon in early 1946 and was assigned to Commando Ponchedier, a combined Army and Navy commando unit named after its commander, Captain Pierre Ponchedier. Trinquier became commander of B4, one of the subunits of the commando, recruited from the colonial infantry. He returned to France in the summer of 1946, charged with the responsibility of recruiting and training volunteers for a colonial parachute battalion that was being formed for combat in Indochina against the Viet Minh. Trinquier returned to Indochina with the 2nd Colonial Commando Parachute Battalion during November 1947. The battalion was assigned to Lai Tu, a refuge for the 301st Viet Minh Regiment, located around 20 kilometers from Saigon. He took part as second-in-command in operations in Cambodia and on the Plain of Reeds in southern Vietnam. He took command of the battalion when its commander, Major Dupuy, was killed in action on the 9th of September 1948, and was promoted to major on the 1st of October, leading the battalion in combat in central Annam and the area around Saigon. He became aware of the inefficiency of the operations launched by the French High Command and proposed to General Boyer de La Tour, the commander of the French forces in southern Vietnam, a new approach to pacifying areas with strong Viet Minh presence. Trinquier's troops occupied the terrain and laid ambushes against the Viet Minh at night instead of the normal policy of taking a few positions where refuge could be taken at night and then reopening the roads in the morning. Trinquier's tactics proved effective, reassured people and pacified the Lai Tu area. On the 12th of December 1949, after 30 airborne operations and numerous ground operations, Trinquier and a battalion embarked on Pasteur, a French transport ship, and returned to France. In late December 1951, Trinquier was again in Indochina for his 3rd tour, this time in the newly formed Groupement de Commandos Mixtes Aéroportés commanded by Edmond Gral. Trinquier took over the command of the GCMA in early 1953 and directed the fighting behind Viet Minh lines, creating a Maquis in the Tonkinese upper region and in Laos, totaling around 30,000 men. Trinquier's Maquis contributed to the successful evacuation of the fortified airhead at Nha San in August 1953, and the reoccupation of the Phong Sali and Sam Nua provinces. After the French withdrawal following the defeat of Dien Bien Phu, Trinquier's Maquis was left behind and hunted down by Ho Chi Minh's forces. Algeria. Trinquier returned to France in January 1955, being promoted to lieutenant colonel and assigned to the staff of General Giles, commander of the airborne troops. He was posted to Algeria in August 1956 at the airborne base of French North Africa as the war against the FLN was becoming more intense. He then served as second-in-command to General Massu, commander of the 10th Parachute Division, during the Battle of Algiers, where he was one of the leading figures behind the creation of the DPU. After a brief stay in France as a director to the Airborne School, Trinquier returned to Algeria in March 1958 to take over command of the 3rd Colonial Parachute Regiment, soon to be the 3rd Marine Infantry Parachute Regiment, when its commanding officer, Marcel Beguerd, was recalled to France. He became a member of the Committee for Public Safety formed by Generals Massu and Salin during the May 1958 crisis, which brought Charles de Gaulle back to power. Trinquier resigned from the committee on the 11th of June and returned to his regiment. He led it during the fighting in southern Algeria and in the Kabylie, where he captured Si Azzedine, a senior FLN leader. During the first half of 1959, Trinquier led the regiment during the Chal offensive, proposed by the French commander in Algeria, Maurice Chal, to cripple the FLN. In March 1959, he handed over the command of the regiment to Louis Bernegal and in July, took command of the El Malia sector in Constantine Department. He was recalled to France in July 1960 and in December assigned to Nice and the staff of the general commanding that group of subdivisions. Later life. On the 26th of January 1961, Trinquier asked for early retirement from the army into the reserve. He was then hired by Moïse Sombe, the leader of the state of Katanga rebellion in Congo, to train his forces. Trinquier only stayed a few weeks in Congo before being thrown out by the United Nations. Returning from Congo, when staying in Athens, he learned of the failed Algiers putsch against de Gaulle, after which he asked to be retired from the reserve as well. In retirement he devoted himself to viniculture and writing about his career and experiences. With Colonel Bakoud, he was one of the founders of the National Union of Paratroopers for veterans of the French Airborne Force. Trinquier was also its first president from 1963 to 1965, before stepping down for General Jean Gracieux. Modern warfare. Trinquier is a theorist on the style of warfare he called modern warfare, an interlocking system of actions, political, economic, psychological, military, which aims at the overthrow of the established authority in a country and its replacement by another regime. He was critical of the traditional army's inability to adapt to this new kind of warfare. These tactics included the use of small and mobile commando teams, torture, the setting up of self-defense forces recruited in the local population, and the forced relocation in camps, as well as psychological and educational operations. Perhaps his most original contribution was his study and application of terrorism examined torture as it related to this modern warfare. He argued that it was immoral to treat terrorists as criminals, and to hold them criminally liable for their acts. In his view, terrorists should be treated as soldiers, albeit with the qualification that while they may attack civilian targets and wear no uniform, they also must be tortured for the very specific purpose of betraying their organization. Trinquier's criteria for torture was that the terrorist was to be asked only questions that related to the organization of his movement, that the interrogators must know what to ask, and that once the information is obtained the torture must stop and the terrorist is then treated as any other prisoner of war. The French army applied Trinquier's tactics during the Algerian War. In the short run, these tactics resulted in a decisive victory in the Battle of Algiers. These tactics were exposed by the press with little or no effect at the time, as they were generally regarded as a necessary evil. In the longer term, the debate on the tactics used, particularly torture, would re-emerge in the French press for decades to come. Popular culture. The character of Julien Boisfleurs in the novels The Centurions and The Praetorians by Jean Larguy was, according to Larguy, not based on anyone, but believed by many to be at least partially inspired by Trinquier and Paul Osseresses. The character of Colonel Jean-Marie Leroncier in another of Larguy's novels, The Hounds of Hell, was certainly based on Trinquier and his activities during the Katanga Rebellion. Larguy's fiction is rather critical of Trinquier's theories on subversive war, which clearly could not be applied in the Congo. The Colonel Leroncier seems rather clumsy and unprepared for the situation he faces in Elizabethville, where his total lack of knowledge of the post-colonial situation in Central Africa soon puts him in trouble with his European and African mentors. He is forced to flee the Katanga's capital after helping secessionists win the first round of fighting against UNO troops. Bibliography. Writings by Trinquier. Modern Warfare, A French View of Counter-Insurgency. Roger Trinquier, La Guerre Moderne, Paris. La Table Ronde, 1961. Roger Trinquier, Le Coup d'État du 13 Mai. Esprit Nouveau, 1962. Trinquier denounces the foundation of the French Fifth Republic as a coup d'état. Roger Trinquier, Jacques Duchemin and Jacques Le Bailly, Notre Guerre au Katanga, Paris. La Pensée Moderne, 1963. Trinquier relates his implication in Katanga. Roger Trinquier, L'État Nouveau. Nouvelles Editions Latines, 1964. Roger Trinquier, Modern Warfare, A French View of Counter-Insurgency, trans. Daniel Lee. Roger Trinquier, La Bataille pour l'élection du président de la République. L'Indépendant, 1965. Roger Trinquier, Guerre, Subversion, Revolution, Paris. Robert Laffand, 1968. Roger Trinquier, Les Maquis d'Indochine. Les Missions Spéciales du Service Action, Paris. Albatros, 1976. Roger Trinquier, La Première Bataillon des Berets Rouges, Indochine, 1947–1949. Paris. Plon, 1984. Roger Trinquier, La Guerre, Paris. Alban Michel.